Welcome to the Growth Over Grades podcast, where we talk about education ideas and topics that matter most to our SpacesEDU educator community. I'm your host, Melody McAllister, educator advocate for SpacesEDU, your solution for digital documentation and assessment of student learning for all. In this episode, I will be talking with Coach William Jeffery, who is the director of Assistant Principals Leadership Academy in Houston ISD. I first met Coach Jeffery when we did a webinar on educator mental health a couple of years ago. Coach has visited our SpacesEDU booths at ISTE 2 years in a row, interviewing us for his own podcast, the award-winning FlipboardEDU Podcast. He has been a regular of our Coffee PLN talks and never ceased to amaze us with his wisdom for whatever we, meaning our group, were going through. Coach is legit the person you see. There is no phony anything about him. He's trustworthy, encouraging, and an incredible leader. He's a 2023 ISTE Ambassador. He's also an author of the Beyond the Status Quo, a school principal's blueprint for organizational change. It is definitely an honor to know him and call him friend. I'm going to drop all of the links in the show notes so that you can check out all of his work. Coach, it's such an honor to have you on the Growth Over Grades podcast. Before we get started, can you tell our listeners about your journey in education?
Hey there. First of all, I just thank you very much for having me on the show. I like to tease you all the time about when I was going to come on, but just thank you for having me. I want to first lay the groundwork for that. I started in education on accident. I wanted to be a doctor, and I didn't pass the MCAT, and then I wanted to be a pharmacist, and then I didn't pass the PCAT, and I was working in the pharmacy, and I had a friend who was teaching at a school called Remington College, and they said they needed people to teach pharmacy technicians. And so that's how I got my start in teaching, and I loved it. I loved it more so than anything, and I became a high school science teacher in Houston Independent School District, and I taught physics. Came in for the physics teacher in November, and that's what started teaching seniors in smack dab in the hood. And I love the students that I had. I love my administrators and my coworkers, and that's what started my educational journey in education.
I love that. I didn't even know any of that. And here I thought we were friends, but that's so that's so cool. What a great background. And how many years have you been in education now?
I've been in education roughly about 18 or 19 years. I like to call it, I try to think of it when my anniversary was. So that's about the time I met my wife. So I've been with my wife about 20 years. So I would say roughly somewhere between 19 and 20 years I've been in education.
Very cool. Very cool. And so even after all this time, you're still in education. You're not pursuing your doctors. Like you don't want to go into pharmacy yet again. What gets you excited? What keeps you excited about education?
Well, you know what? I always like to start in the middle, but what gets me excited about education is a little bit more about my past, because I did not learn how to read until I was in the third grade. As a matter of fact, I was in special education classes, and I was illiterate. I was a functional illiterate, and it wasn't until my teacher, Mrs. Stevenson, asked me to read in front of the whole class, and I would crack jokes and pretend like I'm Eddie Murphy, and then I will never forget that day. She said, "That's not funny. It's not funny at all. I want you to read." So I couldn't read. And so after that, I was pretty much placed in like a reading intervention. And back in those days, my small town was so small that this reading intervention class happened inside of the life skills room that the teachers were. So I would have to spend a lot of time doing reading intervention in the life skills room. I think that changed my life because I'm not that it was such a bad thing, but it gave me an awareness of how important education is. I grew up in a single parent household, and I used to get in trouble about my grades. We're going to find out I was dyslexic. I used to get in trouble about my grades, but it wasn't cool until Theo on the Huxtables, he got in trouble. When they found out he was dyslexic, then everything was fine. And so I remember watching that episode, and I was looking at my mother and my grandmother like, "Man, I've been telling y'all this is how it is." And they was like, "Oh, okay, now I get it. You've been getting it. I've been getting in trouble for years." And so now it's finally, that was about the fifth grade that they woke up from that. But what gets me excited about education, I told that story, is that the teachers who will work with a kid who is a functional illiterate and get him to the point to where he could go and teach or have the aspirations to become a doctor or to become a pharmacist. And all of that happened incrementally behind great teachers that I've had that have shaped me and molded me in my little small town. I had amazing educators and world-renowned educators when I was in college. I graduated from Prairie View A&M University with my undergraduate degree. I grew up in the Prairie View area. We had world-class educators like Dr. Barbara Jackett, um, Dr. George Martin, Dr. We had amazing educators, and these people were serious about education. And so when I was in college, I learned how to be a serious student. I didn't take it seriously, but I learned how to be a serious student. I went to graduate school there as well, and I learned how to be a serious student as well through that. So what gets me excited about education is teachers who are passionate about teaching and learning.
Yeah. That's so cool. Okay, I could just keep listening to you talk. I'm like, yeah, I'm totally into this.
I was like, that's going long. So I was like, yeah, let me go ahead and wrap this up. I went all the way back to the Cosby Show. So,
I love that. No, I didn't even know that about you. Now I feel like a terrible friend.
oh, well, it's okay, man. I don't tell everybody
No,
my secrets. You're lucky today.
yeah. Well, and so you were a child in the 80s going through this, and you got help. How did that, and I know we didn't even script this, but I love this. How did that, like, how long did it take for you to kind of like grab onto the reading part after you got help for your dyslexia?
Dyslexia never goes away. It's something that travels with you your whole life. And at first it was a curse because I really hated it because I couldn't sit down and read stuff one time and I have to read it several times. And there have been times in my professional career as I moved up the educational leadership ladder where I don't think it has been as beneficial for me to be a dyslexic person. Prime example: I was working in the school district, and one of my jobs was to proofread standardized tests. Let me tell you, that was a great time. Okay, I used to stay up a very long time, and so it just wasn't. It's just that part
Right.
of that was not a good thing for me. But being dyslexic, I actually think it helps with my creativity.
Mm.
It's the other superpower that I have. I think that's what made it become a blessing for me.
Yeah, I had an IEP meeting with a parent today, with one of my students who's dyslexic, and it just, we're talking about intelligences. Only if you struggle with reading does not mean that you're not like a super genius or whatever. And the same with my student, like the amazing things that we do in social studies, is just it's incredible to watch him grow. And of course, all my years in fifth grade, I had many students who were not identified as dyslexic until they were in fifth grade. But for all those years in elementary, they felt real stupid. They felt like there was something wrong with them. But as soon as they got help with that, 180. And I've never forgotten that. So thank you for sharing that story. It's incredible. And, I mean, you're right. It never goes away, but you're probably smarter than most of us because it was learning how to read for me was pretty easy. So I didn't have to work in that way, but I love it. And I think, and we're going to be talking about leadership today, probably gives you an insight of what it's like to struggle, what it's like for other people. When you only go down one way and you don't have to struggle so much, you kind of forget that other people have a different perspective. So we've talked, you and I, about leadership posture, but what does that mean and how does that support educators and students?
Well, leadership posture is basically the definition of a way in which you provide the micro political skills it takes in order to provide an environment for people to grow in a way that will allow them to be their best selves. And it is not. It reminds you. This is akin to servant leadership.
Hmm.
It's the bare knuckles, bone brass of what servant leadership is going to become. And so
Mm.
it's your posture and how you approach things. And some of the things that I've learned on my educational journey is that um, you can't lead from the front. Sometimes you have to lead from the back.
Mm.
And In order to support people, you have to be really clear on what a leader does. And a leader can't be somebody that's not supportive, that is not self-reflective. A couple
Right.
of things that I like to look at is that when you are a leader, you have to do the hard work before you do the hard work. And this
Hmm.
is a prime example. That was the 80s when I was growing up. My teachers were predominantly white. Um, they could have had a prejudice. They could have had a prejudice, and if Mrs. Stevens did not take the time out of her day that day and said, enough is enough. You're gonna learn how to read. You are somebody. And so her posture in that moment was that I have a standard for you. I believe in you, and you will meet my standard. And so that posture, she controlled my environment so that I was able to read. And so, to be honest with you, I probably had to go to the life skills room because I couldn't be as funny in there as I was in the class that I was disrupting. And so
Hmm.
that mindset to allow somebody's talents to grow, allow people to do their work, is the posture of a leader that provides growth. And the way I like to think of it is that inside of every seed, there's a forest.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go even further. Inside of every child, there is potential that is beyond measure. And if you look at a child and you make a determination on that child's future, you are doing a disservice to your own life because
Mm.
all of us have a purpose. And I know it's a cliche. Everybody talks about their purpose, but if I was to go back in time and to look at Miss Stevens, for some reason, Miss Stevens saw a principal. I was a principal at that particular time. But had she not taken that moment, I probably would never been a high school principal. I never would have been a director of of an academy. I never would have wrote the books that I wrote. And so the question is, when you're talking about leadership posture, you control environment, you don't control people. It is your attitude towards growth and development, and just having the mindset of nurturing, not lowering the standard, but
Right.
scaffolding the standard so that you're gonna get it right.
Right.
I'm going to support you for right.
I love that. We talked about that on your podcast about how having high standards, literally pulling kids up. And I talked about a class clown that I had, and I didn't even know that we were gonna. Yeah, this is so cool how everything is connected. But you're right. Like, I've never made that analogy before, but yes, every one of our students, when we know that they have a future ahead of themselves, they may not even see it. And probably at the time, you didn't see that. You had been struggling for years not knowing how to read, and you knew that, but no other teacher had figured that out. And I can't even imagine how lost you felt at that time and the cover up that it took, and how many of our students right now are sitting in those chairs being overlooked by other people that probably should know better, but for whatever reason, they're not noticing. And then one teacher comes along and they're like, this is the day that your life is going to change. I can do better. You can do better. We're on this journey together. And I think that is the most beautiful portrait of what education has to offer people.
Yes. And you know what I appreciate about all the teachers that I had, because I didn't just go and learn how to read in the third grade and everything was fine. I had deficits. I had
Right.
years of not being able to read and comprehend. So comprehension was a thing over the years, and then understanding, and then writing. And then when I got, and it must have been like in high school where I finally put it all together and learned how to write. I was accepted to Prairie View A&M University. I would seed my way all the way through. I thought it was just enough, but my instructors there, even though I was making C's, they was like, "Sir, this is unacceptable, and it's not get out of this program. Let me show you what excellence is." And so I was fortunate enough, especially with people like Dr. Martin. We had a guy by the name of Dr. George Brown. Oh man, Dr. Howard Lee. These educators were not playing with the people who they were teaching science to. And it got so I never cared about my grades because I was tall. I could make people laugh. So, I thought I was funny. I tried to holler at whatever young lady I could see. Hey, little girl, how you doing? I thought I was good at that. But that was not going to fulfill my purpose. And so
Right.
I appreciate the standards that they held us to. And so I think that leadership posture is a leader really tending the garden so that seeds can grow.
Right.
I had a better analogy earlier than that, but just to get to the bare bones, like in order for anything to grow, it has to be in a proper environment. And
Right.
a true leader is going to prepare the environment. A true leader is going to prepare the environment so that whatever seed is placed out, it will sprout and it will grow into its own forest.
Wow. I love that. I'm writing that down. I'm taking notes.
Of
And
course.
so we've kind of already talked about how leadership can inhibit or increase growth in school communities, and so I'm going to ask you some like do you have a story of where you've seen maybe a lesson that you've learned along the way where you've seen leadership inhibit and where you've seen leadership cause growth in school communities?
So I'm going to give you one that I think is instrumental. And I'm going to shout out Dr. Michael Milstead. Dr. Michael Milstead and I started podcasting, but I never would have started podcasting if it wasn't for him. And
Hmm.
so he was a former high school principal working in central office in a school by the name of Lamar Consolidated ISD. And I was the science coordinator, K-12 science coordinator at that time. Okay. And we were talking one day, and I was like, man, it's a great conversation. Maybe we should do a podcast. I was joking. And he was like, man, you know what? I always want to do a podcast. And then I said, man, I always want to do a podcast, but I never did. But I never would put my foot in front of the other foot to get it done. And he was like,
Hmm.
it ain't no time to do it, but to do it. You should go ahead and get it going. And then we started my very first podcast, which was I Want to Speak to the Principal.
Mm.
And me and him would talk about the things that a principal would see. And at that time, I hadn't been a principal. I hadn't been an assistant principal. I was a K-12 science coordinator working in a semi-large school district and writing curriculum and looking at science initiatives and trying to grow that science program. But within his talks and mentorship, it allowed me to believe that, hey, man, I think I can become a school leader. And then from there, I went to become an assistant principal at Columbia High School
Wow.
with the help of Scott Moody. And from there, I worked with amazing, amazing assistant principals. I had an amazing secretary. I had an amazing just office staff. I just loved those people to death. And I became the principal of that high school. And at that time, I was the first Black
Wow.
principal ever in the history of that school. So, I mean, I think that because not inhibiting what I could do, but putting forth because I said I wanted to do it, he put
Yeah.
that in motion. And had we not had that conversation, I wouldn't be a podcaster today. And so that led into my other podcasting opportunities.
Yeah. And so Dr. Michael Milstead. Did I
Yes.
say his name? Yeah. And I mean, he literally just said, do it, and I love people that push you to do something. That is a great sign of leadership. You've talked about leadership, not just from an admin perspective, but from the classroom. And we are leaders, like every single one of us. I really hope that, students listen to this. Usually I talk with adults about, education issues, but I think this is a great episode for young people as well. And I meant to say this earlier, but you went from somebody who struggled reading, who couldn't read. Now you've got 3 degrees, two of which are like you've got a master's in counseling, a master's in education administration, and you've been to Harvard. I remember you were at Harvard. Can you
Yeah.
tell us about Harvard?
Yes. Another blessing. I kind of, it's hard for me to say this without getting teary eyed because my mother and my grandmother would be so proud to see that I made it to Harvard. And how I got to Harvard was I applied to the school excellence. And so we have a generous billionaire down here by the name of Charles Butt, and his foundation chose 50 principals out of the state of Texas, and there were so many that applied. I don't know how many. I'm gonna say 600. I'll say 300 applied, but they took 50,
Wow.
and they paid for them. They paid for us to be in Harvard for a 1-year mentor program through
Wow.
the Harvard Principals Education Center, Principal Center, and
Mhm.
so it's just an amazing opportunity to be connected with amazing principals from across the state of Texas, and we went for free.
Wow.
all on the dime of a generous billionaire whose parents were educators, and he has a heart for education. And I really do appreciate their stores down here is HEB. So if anybody's familiar with HEB, it's that foundation, the Charles
Wow.
Bett Foundation. And so he paid for us to go, and I never would have been there. Again, Dr. Milstead was the one who's like, man, I think you need to apply to this. I
Mhm.
went. And so I think this is something that'll be good for you. And so that encouraged me to do that. And now I'm turning around the stuff that I've learned there to put into assistant principals, aspiring assistant principals in the Houston Independent School District. It's just a huge, you never know where somebody is going to end up. And
Yeah.
so, especially with students, and if I could just bring this one little lesson to a student, I read this book one time. It was a story about a young man who nobody really believed in. There was this big giant. The giant was talking trash to these groups of people, and these people were supposed to go and kill this giant, but everybody was scared. So this little bitty kid say, "I'll go kill him," and they was like, "Man, what are you talking about? You ain't gonna be able to kill this giant." But no grown man would step out there and do it.
Mhm.
The funny thing about this young man is that nobody knows that he had killed a bear with his bare hands and a lion. And he told them, I've killed a bear with my bare hands and I've killed a lion with my bare hands. And this giant, he has nothing. And this young man went out and did it. The thing about this young man that I want to relay to students is that don't let people judge you. What you have inside of you was put inside of you for a reason. And if
Mm.
you have courage and
Mm.
if you take leadership of your own life, then that leadership will change your life. But you have to have courage and believe that you're here for a purpose. And that's why so many young people are lost, is because they do not understand their purpose. Their future is not something that's on the outside, it's on the inside. And your
Mm.
future is what you build every single day. And so that is a story of leadership that changed my life, because I also know that when you put yourself in the right position, okay, everything you need is already there. It's already waiting on you. And the ending of the story is crazy, because the young man walked up to the giant, walked near the giant, and there was five smooth stones already waiting for him to kill the giant. The stones
Mhm.
were already there. The stones were placed there, and all they needed was somebody to step up and put the stones in a slingshot. That's the story. And so as long as you put yourself in the right environment and you believe in yourself and you have courage, those things will take care of itself. But you have to put yourself in the right environment.
Right. I've heard that story a million times growing up, and if anybody's out there is not familiar with the story of David and Goliath, I've never been choked up about it. You just got me super choked up. I love that so much, and I'm going to share this with my own students because I absolutely love what you're saying. And you said the future is something that you build every single day, and something that I try to always tell my students is we're not learning these things right now so that you can wait till you grow up to put it into practice. What we're learning right now matters right now. And I think that I might, how believe the Ted Lasso believe poster. I
Yeah,
think I'm going to make my own poster and put the future is what you're building every single day. And
yeah,
that's what I'm slap on mine. That's awesome.
100%. And
Yeah.
the future is not something that you arrive to. The
Right.
future is already inside of you, and
Oh,
you carry that every single day, and you build that future on every decision that you make. And so, even as a leader, if you are lucky enough to be somebody that is a leader, your posture, your attitude, your beliefs, your disbeliefs. You got to make sure you're doing the hard work before you do the hard work. And you got to make sure that you believe in yourself. And if you
right.
can't believe in yourself, then you need to find a way to build your courage up as a leader so that you can provide that environment. Because once the environment is set, then kids are going to flourish.
Yeah.
Once that environment is set, you can grow anything in that environment.
I love that. So this. I've shared some stuff in my own life. sometimes you can follow people and you think that they're great leaders, and they can fall off that pedestal, and nobody's perfect, and being a leader of any kind is super hard because we are not perfect as human beings. But when you think about the leaders in your life, the good leaders, the people that really mean a lot to you, what are some signs that these are trustworthy people, that these are good leaders?
So very good leaders. I was lucky enough to work with Flipboard for no reason at all. There's one of the Dr. Milstead. I was like, hey man, I think I'm finna pitch this idea to Flipboard because the pandemic, there wasn't many resources for teachers. I think I'm gonna tell him I want to do a podcast. And he was like, man, go on, do it. So I reached out to a good friend, Crystal Vanderboom at that time, who was a leader, that was a leader in Flipboard. And ironically, they were looking for something as well. They were looking for somebody to continue a program that they had already started, but it was a food program, but they did recipes and all that. So when the pandemic started, they had to stop it. And so they were looking for another way to do it. And so basically I came to them with the thing. And so what's crazy about that is through that process of me working with Crystal and Flipboard, that I was able to understand a whole new realm of publishing on the Flipboard side. And so I think a sign of a good leader is to take a novice and to make them into an expert. So if you heard all those accolades that I have been, or any good thing that you thought I've heard, it only became because somebody saw something that that I did not see, or they saw one, or they believe further than what I saw. And I think that anybody that is a leader, that's what you do. And it doesn't matter your color, it doesn't matter your sexual orientation. What it matters is that you do what you're supposed to do, provide the environment, and then let things grow.
Right. And I just want to take a moment, and for all of the teachers that you and I know, all of these wonderful people that are constantly improving their craft to be amazing educators to reach the students in front of them. Like, you guys are leaders, and this is magical. Like, our country would not exist. These different professions, they wouldn't exist if we weren't, seeing the future in some of these students' eyes and pushing them, all of them that come, and we don't always have great stories. Like, not every student is going to find their purpose, and they're not going to go to it. And that's the sad part that we also see and that we also deal with. But when we do recognize something great in a student and they move towards that, I think that, and then they come back and tell you, sometimes you'll never know, right? But sometimes they come back and tell you, you saw something in me, and that's why I'm doing this today, just like the story that you shared earlier. And that's an incredible feeling that I'm not sure that anybody else in any other profession ever hears, But yes, helping other people see a different part of life. I feel like in the last few years from the pandemic, learning new trades, learning something outside of education that is education adjacent, has made me a better person. I love thinking about the challenges of what I can do next, I used to always feel like I had to be in this box, this teacher box. I was a teacher. And these last few years, I've been exploring that we are whole people. And it makes me look at my students and say, these are whole people. A title that we wear is just one thing about us. It's not the whole thing. And we could do anything. Our students can do anything. And I think we have to realize that inside first before we can really put that into action. So I know I talked a little bit too much, but you're inspiring. I'm all choked up. Man, I forgot what I was going to say.
Get out of here. Get out of here. I also want to give a shout out to my current boss. I've had some great bosses, Scott Moody, Dr. Allegra McGrew, Yvette Blake. But my current boss, his name is John George. And I love that little man. Let me tell you, like a great leader, this young man is so sharp and I learned leadership posture. I was able to enunciate those words because of him. And I think we all know what a good leader is, kind of intrinsically, we kind of see, but you're talking about a leader that lives good leadership and then works with people to grow. And so and if he wasn't my boss, I would just give him the greatest accolades that I ever could, because working with him has grown me tremendously. And so that's another thing of a sign of good leadership, is because just because you meet somebody who has been to Harvard, who has all these degrees and blah, 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 and blue, the issue is, can you still grow them? You still have to provide that leadership. And so that executive leadership mindset. I now know that there's another level to that, and I want to thank John George for that one.
Yeah. And your team has faced some challenges, like being a leader it's not always accolades and standing ovations. You've had to go through some hard stuff. The Houston ISD has faced some major changes. What sustains you when people don't necessarily understand what you're actually trying to do, but where you're going, the purpose. How do you get through that even when it seems unpopular at the time?
Well, I'm going to tell you, and I'm not going to go too deep into this because I didn't get the full permission to speak through HISD. But, I will say that I am very proud of our superintendent. Our superintendent is a man of great courage and great leadership. And the reason why I say that, and I know a lot of people may not agree, but imagine if you had to go into the eighth largest school district in the world,
Wow.
and excuse me, eighth largest school district in the United States, and there are multiple failures of intrinsic students not being successful on standardized tests, and you have to do something radical. And
Mhm.
so, whenever you see the Houston Independent School District's superintendent, you see people yelling at him, you see people cursing at him, you see people getting all excited, and he's calm, he's collected. And I have great respect for anybody who can control themselves. And he doesn't curse at people, he doesn't raise his voice, but he's about business.
Mhm.
I think that as we move through this, because we've only been taken over by the state, he's a part of the takeover, but for 6 months. And if you were able to hear the good things that's coming out of the school district, there was always people that worked hard.
Mhm.
There was always we had great teachers in Houston Independent School District. We had great principals, but you're hearing about other things. And so I just want to, I think when you're talking about a leader, leaders don't always get to lead through good times.
Right.
A true leader is
Mhm.
somebody who can look to when times are bad. And
Right.
so to have a school, the eighth largest school district in the United States, to be torn down, starting all over in 2 months. I'm talking about you got to tear it down and build it up in 2 months. I don't know if I work with a couple of superintendents, but I'm going to tell you that I appreciate this one. This one's
Yeah.
mindset is elite. It's elite.
Right. The picture that I'm getting in my head is being be refined by the fire, and that would be an amazing. That has to be an incredible sign of leadership to walk through that with your head held high, knowing your mission and that you're pursuing your mission. I love that,
Unrelenting.
yes,
Unrelenting. Come to work
yes,
every day. Guess what? This is what we're going to. You talking about a sign of leadership? I mean, it, it's some people there's some people who have a cause to say, okay, I'll give up. But it is appreciative that this person, um, Mike Miles, I got to give it to him. I don't care what you say. The sign of a leader, he has true leadership, true
Mhm.
leadership.
Listen, I've known you long enough and I know your integrity, so I completely believe him. And I mean, I believe it. I believe it. And I'm looking forward to seeing the change. And it is no small thing to take like such a high goal, to change, to reach our students and give them the change that they deserve, give them a chance that they deserve so that they can be successful in life. Because it's not really about tests or standardized testing. It's literally about changing these kids so that they can see that they have a future. And that really is a sign of leadership. And so we're coming to the end of the podcast and I want to respect your time. But, there may be somebody that is learning the hard way. Maybe they're not the leader that they want to be. I'm not always the leader that I want to be. I make mistakes. I'm imperfect. What can we do right now? What is one thing that we could start that might turn around our leadership abilities?
I think that people can see through fakeness. People know when you're being genuine or not, especially kids. And if we're
Yeah.
talking about leadership that inspires growth, then you got to be truthful and be
Mhm.
truthful with yourself. I mean, I'm talking leadership, but I'm not saying I was the greatest leader, and that all leaders are learning lessons at every stage. And so I'm pretty sure there were some teachers who could not stand me, and Truth be told, there were teachers who I didn't really like either. However, those teachers still need help. Those
Yeah.
kids in those classrooms still need the relationship in order for you to build. And so the question is, how can you work that way? You have to be truthful. First of all, start off with being truthful with yourself and how can you help? And then the next thing is you need to remember that anything that's put in this right environment is going to grow. And so plants need soil, they need water, and they need sunlight. And once they get that, they're going to grow. So, what are the three things that you can do to make yourself better? So, I would take that approach. There are three things that I can do to make myself better. What are those three things? And then I also need to be truthful with myself. And then once you realize that you can control an environment, but not control people, and you put the people in the right environment, they're going to grow. Kids are going to grow. Last but not least, as we're talking about healthy relationships, like don't discount just talking to people and just
Mhm.
going by and say hi and just speaking with people. You don't have, just because you're a leader doesn't mean that you have to be the one. Oh, go do this. Oh, go do that. Try letting other people lead and you do. Try that. Let a teacher be a let a teacher give you a suggestion and then you do it. Or you
Mhm.
walk around with a student, you say, "Give me a suggestion that I can implement."
Yeah.
That trade will also build trust.
Right. Because we're all coach. I mean, we all can learn something. We're not perfect, and we could learn from each other, even people that, yeah, I love that. And something that you said that really is just going to stay with me forever is that, leadership begins inside. We have to be able to lead ourselves before we can lead others. And I don't know that we talk about that enough. So that's pretty cool. In fact, like this whole conversation, I was fighting back. I really love my makeup, so I'm like, okay, tears stay in my eyes. I don't want anything running down.
You
This has been
will
a
make you cry, girl. What?
yeah, like I've gotten choked up several times at this point. And I think you're an amazing leader, but you know what? You're also an amazing friend. And I am so grateful that you came onto this podcast and shared about this. It's something that any age can listen to and take away something. And I'm definitely going to be sharing this episode with my students. And I appreciate that so much. Um, I don't even want to say goodbye, but I don't know. I stopped asking you this question kind of because like you've shared so much wisdom, but is there anything else, Coach, that you want to share before we say goodbye? Anything that's just sitting on your mind or in your heart?
Oh man. I had a we had a meeting today with my boss, and my boss, her name is Sandy Massey. She's the chief of the Learning and Professional Development in Houston Independent School District, and she was talking about be courageous. Be courageous. In today's time, students, teachers, and principals, especially principals, might feel the heat from the teacher shortage,
Mm,
and find a way to be courageous in your activities. Sometimes that might mean you might have to go on a limb and talk to somebody you didn't want to talk to. Maybe that is celebrating the staff in a way that they hadn't been celebrated before. Maybe it's going to go knock on kids' doors who don't come to school. Um, just if those people who believe would just take the time to be courageous, maybe 3 times a week, and let's see how we can change America. I think we can get some stuff done.
yeah. I love this. This is great. I might have to listen to this episode 3 times a week, but leadership starts within us. Be courageous. When we are courageous, it's going to spread in our community. When you look at a child, know that there's something great about them and always believe that they will believe it too and they will conquer this world. Thank you so much. This has been an amazing episode. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me and share, be so vulnerable. I thought I knew you. I didn't know nothing. Okay. Like how did I not? You are even more incredible than I thought you were when we started this.
Man, come on,
Yeah.
girl, stop.
Seriously.
Tell my wife.
Seriously.
Tell my wife. Maybe she'll
I will.
cook me some steak.
You know what? That's next time I'm in Texas. Let's sit down and have dinner all together. I would love
For
that.
sure, for sure.
And to all those that are listening, thank you so much. I would love it if you shared this episode. I think everybody needs to hear this story. And for everybody doing the good work, thank you because it really does take all of us to raise this village. Have a good night and we'll see you again.